And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
Johnny, let's check back in with the Pamela Price podcast.
I am not the mayor of Oakland. How many times did I have to say that in 2023? Why did that matter? Because Oakland needed a scapegoat.
It's everybody else, huh, Pammy?
Wait, I thought she was the crime ringleader.
She called me a crime boss.
Well, that's exactly the woman you want as district attorney, isn't it?
I'm telling you, this is the greatest podcast that nobody's listening to.
It's addictive, though. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't fall back asleep and you start listening to that. Guess what? You'll be listening to it until you eat breakfast.
I've been bipped several times.
800-222-5222 is a telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is the author of so many New York Times bestsellers. You have to go to her website to take a look at the list of all of them, which, of course, is at AnnCoulter.com. And if you aren't subscribed to her Substack, you definitely should, because she posts interesting interviews on all the top subjects in the news all the time, and you learn so much, and they're fun to watch. So make sure you subscribe to that, too. And follow her on X at Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter, welcome.
Good to talk to you, John Phillips.
All right. Now, I view you as many things. A great author, someone who's very smart, but also a walking, talking report card for Donald Trump on immigration. So
That's
I
true.
want to go ahead and get the report card right now. How's he doing so far on the subject of illegal immigration?
It's a good question. Obviously, some of the stuff he's doing is great. He sounds like when he was running in 2016, like his heart's in the right place. He definitely wants to get rid of them. Homan seems to be doing a terrific job, and everything that he can do by executive order seems quite good. But unless he gets on the phone and calls up members of Congress to tell them, give me a wall, give me wall funding, or just, I mean, as I've said from the beginning, he does not need Congress to build the wall. He's in charge of the defense. He's the commander-in-chief. He has to defend the nation. It used to be that the entire defense of America, I mean, the idea of a defense was to guard the borders. He has the Army Corps of Civil Engineers. He has all the authority as president to just start building the wall, but he seems to think he needs a specific appropriation, and if Republicans were smart, they'd bring it up in a bill and let Democrats vote against it. But it looks like they're not going to be smart. They're just going to keep passing CRs. I'm totally with Thomas Massey on this. So a lot of the great stuff, and Trump is doing great stuff, it's just going to be written in sand unless this gets written into law. It's got to be codified. And to do that, he's apparently got to get on the phone and read the riot act to Republicans, and not Thomas Massey, the only one who seems to be a true MAGA person in Congress.
You've written extensively about birthright citizenship, and it looks like that could potentially go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court obviously is a 6-3 Republican appointee advantage, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote in favor of Donald Trump. Can you explain to the people in layman's terms just exactly why birthright citizenship isn't something we ever voted on, isn't something that Congress ever passed? It's something that was part of a ruling on a subject that really had nothing to do with anything related to immigration.
Well, it was kind of about immigration. It was definitely not about birthright citizenship. Yes, that's right. I mean, they act like as if, this is something that came from the pen of James Madison. No, it's in the Constitution. It isn't really birthright citizenship. I mean, there's a reason advocates for illegal immigrants and illegal immigrants themselves, basically people who want to destroy America, refer to it as birthright citizenship rather than anchor babies, and act as if anchor babies, and they will actually say this, that's like using the N-word. Would you use the N-word? Whenever anyone pulls the argument, would you use the N-word you know it's a bad argument. No, the N-word, there are a few other words, very special. Don't compare every word that you don't have an answer to the N-word. In any event, the actual 14th Amendment was about giving slaves citizenship. They were not being treated as full citizens in many parts of the country immediately after the Civil War. Over and over and over again, the Supreme Court held that for 100 years, including the KKK are on the court. Justice Black, in his decisions, this is an amendment about freed slaves. The end, period. And then that sneaky little Irishman, Justice Brennan, when he had a case that has very strong meaning to Californians, who tried to do the same thing, Texas was going bankrupt, educating the children of illegals. So they said, no, we're not going to do this anymore. If you're an illegal alien, we're not using taxpayer funds on your kids. You want to get an education, go back to Mexico or wherever. That went to the Supreme Court. Justice Brennan wrote an opinion saying, no, the Constitution requires you, state of Texas, to pay for the education of illegal aliens and their children. And then he drops a footnote. It wasn't even part of the main decision. And as constitutional scholars know, the Supreme Court and other courts only decide cases. They decide cases between the two parties in front of them. Now, if the exact same case comes up with different parties, that will count as precedent. But they're not writing law. They are deciding a case. This case had nothing to do with whether the children of illegals are citizens. Brennan drops a footnote saying, I don't really see any rational difference between the children of legal aliens and the children of illegal aliens. I can think of about 20 differences, starting with the fact that one is legal and one is illegal. But this was pure dicta. He had absolutely no support for it. He cited some guy like Morris Clement or something who had written a book. He wasn't a judge. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a scholar. But he said, "Oh, I don't see any difference." And Justice Brennan drops a footnote saying, "I don't see any difference." And it is entirely from that case, which I think was in the 80s, and not the 1880s, that we just started acting as if we certain hate America groups within our government, acting as if these were citizens. As I described in my book, Adios America, Judge Richard Posner, again, the legal scholars will certainly recognize that name. He's the most cited federal judge. No friend of conservatives, kind of a libertarian crank, but brilliant. He's retired now. He's on the Seventh Circuit, taught at University of Chicago. In some immigration case, I think it was about an asylee and her kids and whether she could be deported without her kids, something like that. Doesn't really matter. But he was agreeing with the decision, and he wrote separately in a concurrence, simply to make the point, Congress should pass that this isn't constitutional, this anchor baby crap. Congress should pass a law and make it clear, end the nonsense. So we could really use a law, though it's not necessary. I think Trump could, I don't know if he has issued an executive order on this. I think he can just issue an executive order, let that go up to the Supreme Court, and have the Supreme Court say, yes, Mr. President, you are right. No court has ever ruled that the children of illegals are citizens. Congress has never passed a law expressly saying that the children of illegals are citizens. There is a case, as for the children of legal immigrants, there is a case going back to, I think it's 1894, of a Chinese guy whose parents were here, and we had some admittedly discriminatory laws against the Chinese Exclusion Act, and he had been born and grown up in San Francisco. His parents ran, I think, a laundromat. They, in their retirement, went back to China. By the way, something immigrants never do today. They go on Social Security. They bring in their elderly parents to sign up for Social Security. But that's an aside.
Now they go to Arizona and Nevada like everyone else.
Right, but sucking up money from the federal fisc. So he goes to visit his parents in China. When he's coming back, his entire life has been here. And they were here legally. They hadn't snuck in, though they never did become citizens, but they were here legally. And he was stopped at the border and said, no, you're not a citizen, you can't come in. And the Supreme Court ruled in that case, no, the children of legal immigrants, at least in this one case. And like I say, its cases are controversies. They're not making generally applicable law. They were deciding it for this one case. And I mean, there are plenty of ways you could distinguish that case. I'm not sure it's such a great idea to have the children of legal immigrants be auto citizens. I think we ought to have a little more say on that. You know, I'm sorry, I'm blathering, I'm filibustering, but Switzerland, one of the best-run countries in the world, I think this is no longer the case, but it's a fairly recent change. For a century to become a Swiss citizen, you had to wait 3 generations, and then your local canton would decide whether the 3rd generation qualified for citizenship. And I think that is an excellent rule we might want to look at.
Now, I know it's impossible to predict what juries are going to do, and it's hard to predict what courts are going to do. But if this were to make its way, birthright citizenship, to the Supreme Court, how do you think they'd vote? And I say that because I don't know how close you paid attention to the way the justices were looking at Trump when he was walking in to give that speech before a joint session of Congress. But Amy Coney Barrett was so cold, I think there was frost coming out of her eyeballs when she was looking at him. And I don't know if I trust her on this one.
I have never trusted her on immigration. Never, never, never. I think she's a bit of a papist nut, and all of this, all the children of the world, and not much of a patriotic feeling there. I could be wrong. I would trust Roberts. I absolutely trust Kavanaugh. He's written some fantastic immigration decisions. But yeah, I think Amy Coney Barrett could be the weak link.
So wait, so if we got Kavanaugh, we have Roberts, I'm sure we'd have Alito and Thomas. And what about Gorsuch? Do you think he'd vote with us?
I think so. So I think it would be 5-4.
Okay. Well, who cares as long as you get to 5?
No, that's right. That's right. Though, I may as well, put a pin in the point I'm making here. Can we stop appointing women to things because we need a woman?
We were speaking with Ann Coulter,
for that.
who you can follow on X at Ann Coulter. Ann, let's shift gears here and talk about what's going on right now in the states, particularly in the state of California, where Governor Gavin Newsom thought it would be a grand idea to offer health care to illegal aliens. And he came up with what the projected cost would be. Of course, that projected cost is way under what the actual number is because the count of the number of people here illegally is way under what the actual number is. And now the state is broke, and he is going to the legislature and saying, oh boy, did I blow this one. It's going to cost us over $3 billion more than I told you, so we need to go find it somewhere. Now that these states are broke and they don't have money to give to the unions, which is their reason for being in elected office, what do you think they're going to do about all of these goodies that they're giving the illegals? Do you think that the illegals will win out over the unions, or do you think that the unions will win out over the illegals because it's a zero-sum game and they're broke?
Ooh, that's a good question, John Phillips. I tend to think the illegals win. Although these are public sector unions, and Democrats do love their public sector unions, they get a lot back from them. So it's kind of, they have to balance how much help they get from public sector unions, government employees, which is why there should be no public sector unions. You're negotiating against, the boss is negotiating against his own boss, which is the public sector unions. They're the ones who get the boss elected. So it's never made any sense. The idea of a union is you're fighting against management. Management wants to lower your pay. You want to raise your pay. You want better work conditions. But in the case of Democrats and government workers, well, they don't care. They'll take pay through the roof and benefits through the roof. Just back me in the next election. So they have to balance their interest in sucking up to the people who help get them reelected versus the long-standing desire to wreck the United States of America. So I'd say that's a draw.
On the subject of Gavin Newsom, he has a new podcast that's out where he's trying to rebrand himself as Bill Clinton in 1992. He wants to brand
hilarious.
Not as funny as Pamela Price's podcast, but pretty funny. And he's had Charlie Kirk on, where he dropped the bomb that he does not support biological men competing in women's sports. And then he had Michael Savage on. I guess Steve Bannon is the third guest, and who knows who he's going to book in the future. What do you make of him trying to reinvent himself as some kind of blue dog Democrat who can talk to Red America? And what do you think about the idea of these people going on that podcast and sitting down with him and essentially giving him street cred as a moderate?
That's a good question.
Because I think you would do it. Would you go on his podcast? You'd mop the floor with him on immigration, so why not?
Yeah, there's almost nothing. I'm hesitating. Is there anything I wouldn't do if it were convenient?
Fly Delta.
Publicity-wise. And as for him rebranding himself, no, it's very interesting. The smart Democrats, I say that with some hesitation, but, Bill Clinton, I hate to say it, but James Carville, Rahm Emanuel, certainly people like Ned Lamont, they know the progressives are destroying them. It's perfectly obvious. The progressives, their insane base, and they do have an insane base, is really killing them with normal people. And so I guess they're all kind of trying to stake out normality, or as Trump calls it, common sense. The tough thing for the Democrats, and I think it will be fun to watch, is that you'll notice all the people I just named. I mean, maybe there's a woman or a BIPOC in there, but these are all pretty much white men, and white men are persona non grata in the Democratic Party. This is what happens when you wage a war on white men. And wow, that is the Democratic Party. So are they going to turn around and nominate? I don't know if you remember. I think before Obama, or no, I think it was with Hillary Clinton. There was a big movement in the black community. This is the last time we vote for an all-white ticket. Yeah, it was Hillary and Governor Keene or Senator Keene. This is the last time we vote for an all-white ticket. So I don't know. Gavin Newsom and Andy Beshear, the rest of them, Rahm Emanuel, they could all be barking up the wrong tree, because once the primary voters vote, it's overwhelmingly the primary voters in the Democratic Party are African American. And I think any African American who runs would have a good chance to beat even the most reasonable and possibly electable. Oh, Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Can the Democrats nominate a white male anymore? I guess we'll find out.
Newsom seems to think that the Democrats are going to be like how they were in 1992. When they were in the wilderness, they lost elections they thought they should have won, and they moved to the center because they realized that unless they did that, they were going to lose again. Particularly after the Gulf War, when H.W. Bush was high in the polls. That's certainly where Newsom is putting his chips. But you look at the behavior at that joint session of Congress, where they were all explicitly told by Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer not to act like jerks. Don't protest. Don't do anything that makes you look like a buffoon. Don't be the headline in the newspaper the next day. Just sit there, listen to it, and then poke holes in his arguments afterwards. And what did they do? Every single one of them, or almost every single one of them, ignored him. You had Al Green, who had his tantrum on the floor. He got kicked out. You had all the ladies in pink. You had the signs that they were carrying like they were at an auction. And the Democrats and their behavior became the story. And then afterwards, they all gave interviews where it was like listening to an Andrew Dice Clay show, where it was F this and F that, and every single one of them was swearing. They were swearing in their tweets. They were swearing in their videos that they were putting online. And when they're asked why suddenly someone like Tina Smith, who's this prim and proper Minnesota nice woman, and it was F this and F that on Twitter, and someone on TV said, "You don't talk like that. Why are you suddenly obscene?" And she said, well, when I go back home and I talk to the Democrats in Minnesota, they're really angry and they want me to be angry, so that's what you get. And I just kind of think that if that's where their electorate is, being the Bill Clinton in 1992 is not the way to win them over. Being the most obscene, the loudest, the most profane, they may end up nominating Jasmine Crockett for all we know.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Or Governor Pritzker.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be my fave, and he's definitely running for president, which is totally hilarious. Yes, I think you said it more beautifully, the point I was making, or they dovetail together. I don't know if they can nominate, if they're capable of nominating a sane person. It's going to be fun to watch. I don't know if you remember. I certainly remember waking up the morning, get the Chiron on TV that Kamala had picked Waltz as her vice president. And I danced a jig. I was so happy it was not Governor Shapiro. I was really worried. In retrospect, it probably wouldn't have made a difference. But I was so glad it wasn't Shapiro. And, why not Shapiro? Because, no, he's too pro-Israel. And their Muslim fanatics objected to that. So good luck, Democrats.
Last question before you go. Let's go back to the swearing for a second, because there are people who swear, and if it's just within their character, you expect it. Trump swears, but he's always sworn. He's always been that guy. He's a New Yorker. He uses salty language. We all know that. There are certain Democrats out there James Carville swears all the time. We all know that too. But there are people who don't swear who suddenly decided strategically that it makes them look more authentic, or it makes them look more passionate, or it makes them look more willing to take Donald Trump on. What do you think is motivating them to do this, and do you think it'll work?
Well, it probably is what you quoted that congresswoman saying. And yeah, you're right. The point you're edging up toward is how it just doesn't work when it's coming from people for whom this isn't natural. For me, it's very natural. Just rolls right off the tongue, which I try to keep in check on radio, John Phillips. But yeah, no, I think you're right. You can tell when people are faking that kind of anger. And it's kind of embarrassing. Just be yourself.
Ann Coulter, you can get her online at anncoulter.com. If you haven't subscribed to her Substack, you should go do that right now. Great interviews are posted all the time. And you can follow her on X at Ann Coulter. Ann, thanks so much for stopping by.
Good to talk to you, John Phillips. Bye.
Likewise. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. Do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. Here's something fun you can do. Let's say you're going out for a night on the town. Load up our podcast while you're sitting in your Waymo and have the robot drive you to karaoke night at the Indian restaurant.
Spicy karaoke.
Sign me up. Yesterday, we told you about the bonkers mob-like story coming out of the city of Oakland that involved everything you would expect to see in a mob movie, including a hit or an attempted hit. And today, Randy, we have the take of former Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price on the charges against former Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao.
She called me a crime boss.
I might be the only person listening to Pamela Price's podcast, And that's why we can exclusively bring you Pammy Price's take on the Sheng Tao indictment. Shangy, are you ready?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know who needs a podcast, by the way?
Oh, Shangy.
Oh, come on. I would listen to that all day long.
And he said, absolutely.
I'd produce it.
All right, Pammy, what you got to say on this?
Welcome back to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Since we're talking about the Oakland mayor's race and politics in Oakland, let's talk about how we got here. There was a federal indictment of our mayor and some local businessmen. So we're going to talk about three things.
One of them that you tried to shake down.
For $25,000, allegedly.
So we're going to talk about three things. Let's look at how this story unfolds. Let's look at what are the charges, and let's look at what is the evidence so far. The story allegedly begins on October 7th, 2022, when Mario Juarez meets with then candidate Sheng Tao.
Doing a great job, Pammy.
Although I will say this, if there's any way to make her the voice of my iPhone, whenever I'm driving in traffic and they're trying to tell you, go left here, go right there, stay on this freeway, get on that freeway. Imagine having that in Pamela Price's voice.
She called me a crime boss.
I'd do it.
Then candidate Sheng Tao to discuss the purchase of housing units from a housing company owned by Mario and the Duong family.
Some would call it the Dong family, but you do you, Pammy.
She's not going to pronounce it that way.
If you don't know who Mario Juarez is, Google him, okay?
We did, and he alleges that you tried to charge him $25,000 to drop charges against him.
He's not a fan of yours, Pammy.
In return for the mayor using her influence to buy 100 housing units for $30 million.
This is why, by the way, we have to have somebody, an outsider, go into every single contract for affordable housing, not just in Oakland, but in Los Angeles City, Los Angeles County, San Francisco, and the state of California, because a lot of these contracts are as dirty as this one.
Can you imagine what they'd find?
Mario allegedly offers one, to send out a campaign mailer attacking then candidate Tao's opponents in the mayor's race, and two, to pay her partner Andre Jones $300,000.
Well, how come you're only getting 25?
According to the federal indictment, Mayor Tao connects Mario with Andre Jones the next day, October the 8th, via text message. The indictment alleges that Mario and Andy Duong met with the mayor at a fundraiser, the candidate Tao, at a fundraiser on October 11th, 2022, where they finalized the deal.
Was that the fundraiser where Andre Jones was going up to all the donors and saying, hey, what job do you want?
That was in the park, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
According to the DOJ, David Duong agreed to pay $75,000 for the campaign mailer attacking then candidate Tao's opponents after they met at the fundraiser on October the 11th.
And then, of course, Mario Juarez hired a printer to put out these racist ads against Lauren Taylor where they darkened his skin. And then he stiffed the printer.
That printer's still upset.
Mario made the arrangements to send out the campaign mailer. Mayor Tao alleged.
Now, is Pam Price doing this story because she's still pissed at Mario?
I think she's pissed at everyone.
She has a lot of getting even to do.
Mario made the arrangements to send out the campaign mailer. Mayor Tao allegedly texts Mario on October the 12th text Andre on October the 12th to get Mario, tell him to get Mario what he needs.
Pammy, you might want to be a little more focused when you're telling this story.
No kidding. It sounds like she's reading this cold.
She's got the indictment in front of her, but she's new at this broadcasting thing. But when you're talking about the specific allegations, you've got to get the names right. Just a little advice from one broadcaster to another.
She seems perpetually confused.
Tell him to get Mario what he needs and connect with him. On October 17th, according to the federal indictment, the Duongs paid Mario $75,000 by check. Mario designed the mailers and a website to go with it and sent out the mailers to Oakland voters on November 1st, 2022.
And if you remember how close that election was, it was ranked choice voting, and I think they got to like the 8th or 9th round, and Sheng Tao won by like 600 votes.
Oh, yeah, it was a nail-biter.
That's right. I like that. That was amazing.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Will writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com and says, I wonder if Pamela Price's middle name is actually Nameyor.
She called me a crime boss.
If so, there's an assemblyman in San Francisco who would be quite fond of her.
Quite frankly.
Phil Ting is the name.
I think that was What's Your Price?
Oh, I stand corrected. Right now, we're going through the sound of former Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price's podcast
as she goes through the Sheng Tao indictment.
There's an interesting tidbit in the complaint in paragraph 25, because what happened, the mayoral election was held on November 8th, 2022. Tao was declared the winner on or about November 21st, 2022. And on or about November 18th, however, 2022, according to paragraph 25 of the indictment, Mario and Andy Duong exchanged messages, text messages regarding the election. When it became evident that Tao was going to win the mayoral race and that another individual was winning the race in the Alameda County District Attorney's race, Mario texts to Andy, so we quote, so we may go to jail, but we are $100 million richer.
Whoa, that's not going to look good in front of a jury.
So apparently there was a candidate that they had bought and paid for that wasn't Pamela Price, which is interesting because of the allegations that Pamela Price wanted $25,000 from Mario.
Andy responded, money buys everything.
If you're their defense attorney, how do you explain these messages?
There is no defense. These guys are all going down unless they cut a deal. And the fact that Andy Duong said this.
Andy responded, money buys everything.
Tells you exactly everything you need to know about California's Attorney General, Rob Bonta.
And it also goes to show you how dumb they are. Not only that you think that and do that, but you put it in writing.
And Mario replied, you're right. Plus, we have a 10-year extension to the recycling company. So they seem to be concerned about the fact that Terry Wiley, their candidate, had lost the DA's election. But I digress.
It doesn't matter what the topic is. This whole podcast is about her getting even because she thinks she was wrong, and she's pissed off that everyone blamed her for the crime in Oakland.
Oh, and she's out to settle scores.
Quite frankly.